I stood at the podium of Stanford's largest lecture hall, 23 years old, adjusting the microphone while 400 graduate students settled into their seats. My hands were steady. My voice would not waver. Because 15 years ago, my parents had done everything in their power to ensure I would never stand anywhere like this. They had enrolled me in Westbrook Academy, a school so neglected, so deliberately abandoned by the district that even its name had become a punchline. And they had smiled while doing it. The lecture hall quieted. I looked out at the sea of faces, most belonging to people older than me, people who had travelled traditional paths to arrive here. I had taken a different road, one paved with silence, observation, and relentless self-construction in the shadows. "Good morning," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the space. "Welcome to Advanced Topics in Abstract Algebra. I'm Professor Richardson, and over the next 15 weeks, we're going to explore some of the most beautiful structures in mathematics." A hand raised in the back. I nodded. "How old are you?" I smiled, not the practiced smile I had perfected as a child, the one that said nothing, revealed nothing. A real smile. 23. And before you ask, yes, I have the credentials to teach this course. My CV is posted online. Any other questions about my qualifications, or shall we discuss ring theory? The room stayed silent. Good. I had learned long ago that confidence without arrogance, clarity without apology, was the most effective form of communication. I began the lecture, and as I wrote equations on the board, as I guided these students through complex proofs, I allowed myself a moment to remember exactly how I had arrived here. I was 8 years old when I overheard the conversation that would define my childhood. It was a Tuesday evening in September. Dinner had ended an hour earlier, and I was supposed to be asleep. But the heating vents in our old house carried sound in strange ways, and my parents' voices floated up from the kitchen into my bedroom with perfect clarity. The placement test results came back, my mother said. I could hear her setting down a coffee mug. Amelia scored in the 99th percentile across all categories. The school psychologist called me personally. They're recommending immediate placement in the gifted program at Riverside Prep. I had pressed my ear against the floor, heart hammering with something I would later recognise as hope. Riverside Prep was the best school in the district. Modern facilities, award-winning teachers, 100% college acceptance rate. My father's response came slowly, deliberately. No. A long silence. What do you mean, no? My mother's tone shifted. Not arguing exactly, just clarifying, seeking to understand. I mean, we're not sending her to Riverside, we're enrolling her at Westbrook. My breath caught. Westbrook Academy was where the district sent students they had given up on. I had passed it once on a field trip. Buildings with broken windows, a playground with rusted equipment, graffiti on the walls. The local news did stories about Westbrook every few years, always with the same concerned tone reserved for disasters. But why would we? Because Victoria needs to shine, my father interrupted, his voice hardening with conviction. Your daughter from your first marriage has always been adequate, nice enough. She tries hard, but Victoria is exceptional and she's going to Riverside. She needs to be the star there. She can't compete with Amelia's test scores. Victoria, my half-sister, 3 years older than me, born to my mother's previous marriage. The child who could do no wrong. The daughter whose artwork covered the refrigerator, whose report cards were discussed at length over dinner, whose every minor achievement was celebrated as proof of future greatness. If Amelia goes to Westbrook, he continued, and I could hear him pacing, she'll learn humility. She'll understand her place in this family. And Victoria will have the space she needs to thrive without constant comparison. It's better for everyone. My mother said nothing for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, resigned. All right, if You think that's best? That single word, all right, shattered something in me I hadn't known was fragile. Not my intelligence, not my potential, but my trust that the people who were supposed to protect me would actually do so. I stayed pressed against that floor for another hour, listening to them discuss Victoria's upcoming violin recital, her straight A report card, her acceptance into an advanced art program. My name didn't come up again. That night, I learned that love could be conditional, that family could be a hierarchy, that some children were investments while others were obstacles to be managed. I cried silently into my pillow until 3 a.m, and then I stopped crying, because tears were pointless. Emotion was a luxury I could no longer afford. If they were going to treat me as expendable, I would become indispensable in ways they couldn't see or control. Westbrook Academy smelled like mildew and resignation from the first moment I walked through its doors. The entrance hall had tiles missing from the floor. The main office windows were covered with cardboard where glass should have been. A water stain spread across the ceiling like a malignant growth, and nobody seemed to care enough to fix it. On my first day, I watched a ceiling tile fall during math class. It landed on an empty desk with a crash that made several students jump. The teacher, a woman in her 50s who looked profoundly tired, barely glanced up from the outdated textbook she was reading aloud. "Someone move that," she said without inflection, and returned to her monotone recitation of basic algebra. Victoria attended Riverside Prep across town, where the library had been renovated twice in 3 years and every student received a personal tablet for coursework. Parents donated money for new equipment. Teachers won awards. The building gleamed. At Westbrook, we shared textbooks from 1987. Their spines held together with duct tape and hope. The science lab had sinks that didn't work. The computer room had 12 computers for 300 students, and half of them had broken keyboards. But the physical neglect wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the psychological abandonment. Teachers arrived late and left early. Substitutes outnumbered permanent staff. Lesson plans were photocopied sheets with instructions to read chapter 5 and answer questions. Nobody expected anything from us, and after a while, most students stopped expecting anything from themselves. At dinner each evening, my parents would ask Victoria about her day, with genuine interest and enthusiasm. "How was Latin class? Tell us about your science fair project. Did you get the lead in the school play?" They would nod and smile and praise every small accomplishment, every minor achievement, as though she were personally discovering fire or inventing language. When they turned to me, if they turned to me, the question was always the same. Any problems we need to know about? Not, "How was your day?" Not, "What did you learn?" Not, "Did anything interesting happen?" Just, "Are you causing trouble? Are you creating complications? Are you making our lives harder?" I learned quickly to say no, to offer no details, to fade into the background of dinner conversations like wallpaper. My father would sometimes make jokes about the family disappointment when colleagues came over for drinks. "We've got one genius and one who's just trying to get through," he'd say with a laugh, and everyone would chuckle politely. My mother would add, "We love them both the same, of course," but her eyes never quite met mine when she said it. I learned to smile through these moments, to nod as though I found them funny too, to give them no reaction that could be used against me later. But I didn't fade at school. I couldn't afford to. I had always possessed a memory that others found unsettling when they noticed it, which was rarely. Eidetic memory, one school counsellor had called it during a testing session in 2nd grade, before my parents had pulled me from the gifted evaluation programme. I could read something once and recall it perfectly. Every word, every diagram, every equation, not photographically. I wasn't seeing an image of the page. I was simply absorbing and retaining information with a completeness that seemed normal to me and extraordinary to everyone else. At Westbrook, where teachers often didn't show up and substitutes read from outdated lesson plans without understanding the material themselves, this became my survival tool. I haunted the school library, 3 dusty rooms with books nobody touched. The librarian was a man named Peterson, who spent most of his time doing crossword puzzles and seemed genuinely surprised anyone still checked out books. "You can take as many as you want," he told me the first time I approached his desk with a stack of 6 volumes. "Nobody else is reading them." I read everything. Biology texts from the 70s with outdated terminology, history books with maps showing countries that no longer existed, mathematics compilations that predated calculators, literature anthologies with pages yellowed and brittle. I absorbed it all, storing it away like a dragon, hoarding treasure in a vault nobody else knew existed. The other students thought I was strange. They weren't cruel about it. Westbrook didn't have the energy for organised bullying. They were just indifferent. I was the quiet girl in the corner who never caused problems and always did her homework and sometimes said smart things in class when teachers actually bothered to ask questions. Background noise, easily ignored, forgettable, perfect. Because while they ignored me, while my teachers overlooked me, while my parents forgot me, I was building something they couldn't see. A foundation, a fortress, a future constructed in silence and solitude. At home, I became a ghost. I learned to move through rooms without making sound. I mastered the art of eating dinner without drawing attention, chewing quietly, never reaching for seconds, asking to be excused at exactly the right moment. I perfected the expression that said, "Nothing interesting here," so thoroughly that my parents would sometimes startle when they realised I was sitting on the couch or standing in the kitchen. "Oh, Amelia, I didn't see you there," my mother would say, hand over her heart as though I had materialised from nowhere. I hadn't materialised. I had been there the whole time. They simply didn't look. Victoria bloomed in contrast to my invisibility. Honour, role every semester, lead in the school musical, president of 3 clubs, first chair in the youth orchestra. My parents glowed with pride at every accomplishment, displaying her achievements like trophies. They hosted dinner parties where Victoria would play violin for guests. They attended every performance, every competition, every awards ceremony. They posted endless photos on social media. Victoria at the science fair, Victoria accepting a ribbon, Victoria smiling with her friends. I appeared in none of these photos, not because I was excluded from them, technically, but because nobody thought to include me. I was the daughter in the background, the one who attended the failing school, the one who wasn't worth documenting. My report cards came home with straight A's every semester. My parents would glance at them briefly and place them in a drawer without comment. "Of course she gets good grades there," my father said once, not realising I was within earshot in the next room. "The standards are non-existent. A trained monkey could get straight A's at Westbrook." "It doesn't mean anything," my mother murmured agreement. "It's not like Riverside. Victoria works so hard for her grades." I said nothing. I had learned that silence was power. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment of calculated cruelty, I filed it away. Not with anger, not with resentment, with clarity. They thought they were breaking me. They thought they were teaching me to accept my lesser position in the family hierarchy. They were sharpening me, tempering me, creating something they would never understand. I was 12 years old when I discovered the university library. Westbrook was only 3 miles from State University's campus. The public bus ran every hour, and the fare was $2 each way. On Saturdays, while my parents attended Victoria's swim meets and debate competitions and art shows, I would tell them I was going to a friend's house, a lie they never questioned because they didn't care where I was, and take the bus to the university instead. The main library was 7 stories of everything Westbrook wasn't: current textbooks, research journals, computer labs with actual working computers, quiet study spaces with proper lighting, and nobody questioned a quiet girl in the corner who looked like she belonged. The first day, I spent 8 hours there. I started with the mathematics section, pulling down freshman-level calculus textbooks and working through them systematically. Every chapter, every example, every problem set, the concepts weren't just interesting, they were beautiful, elegant. They had an internal logic that made perfect sense in ways that nothing in my life at home ever did. In mathematics, there were rules that didn't change based on favoritism or birth order. There were proofs that held true regardless of who you were or how much your parents loved you. I came back the next Saturday, and the next, and the next. By 13, I was reading sophomore-level material in multiple subjects. By 14, junior-level texts in mathematics, physics, and chemistry. I worked through entire courses on my own, teaching myself concepts that most people encountered only with professors and structured lessons. The librarians knew me by sight eventually, but never asked questions. I was just another student, albeit a young-looking one, buried in books. They didn't know I wasn't enrolled. They didn't know I was building a graduate-level education in secret, one stolen Saturday at a time. I kept notebooks, dozens of them filled with notes and solutions and proofs. I hid them in my closet at home behind boxes of old clothes. My parents never went in my room anyway, but caution had become second nature. At Westbrook, I remained unremarkable. I did the assigned work, which took almost no effort, and said nothing to suggest I was studying material years beyond grade level. At home, I was invisible. But in that library, surrounded by knowledge that had nothing to do with family politics or social hierarchy, I was becoming something they couldn't imagine. I was becoming dangerous. High school began the same year Victoria started college. Naturally, she was accepted to Riverside Prep's affiliated university with a full scholarship and enough awards to fill a display case. The celebration lasted a week. Dinners at expensive restaurants where my parents toasted Victoria's future. A new car, silver and shining, parked in our driveway with a bow on it. A top-of-the-line laptop for her dorm room. Endless social media posts about their brilliant daughter's achievements, how proud they were, how excited for her future. My 14th birthday happened during this celebration week. My parents forgot it entirely. No cake, no gifts, no acknowledgement. Victoria remembered 2 days later. "Oh, was that your birthday? Sorry, I've been so busy with college prep." "It's fine," I said, and meant it. I had stopped expecting anything from them years ago. I started 9th grade at Westbrook High, where the dropout rate had climbed to 60% and the graduation rate hovered somewhere around 35%. The building was even more decrepit than the middle school had been. Lockers didn't close properly. The bathrooms lacked soap and sometimes toilet paper. Teachers were visibly counting down days until retirement or transfer to better districts. "At least try not to embarrass us," my mother said the night before school started. She was helping Victoria pack for college, folding expensive clothes into designer luggage. "Victoria is at a real university now. People know our family name. If you get into trouble at that school, it reflects on all of us." I nodded, smiled, returned to my room. That weekend, while my parents drove Victoria to campus and helped her move into her dorm, I took the bus to the university library and began working through organic chemistry and linear algebra. I stopped reacting to anything at home. When my father made jokes about the family disappointment at dinner parties, I smiled politely and excused myself to do homework. When my mother forgot to mention college information sessions at Riverside Prep that I technically could have attended, I said nothing. When Victoria came home for Thanksgiving and my parents threw an elaborate welcome home party complete with catered food and a "Welcome Back Victoria" banner, while barely acknowledging my presence, I remained calm. They mistook my silence for defeat, for acceptance of my role as the lesser daughter, the one who attended the failure school, the one who would probably work retail if she was lucky. They had no idea I was taking practice SATs from the library and scoring perfect 1600s on every attempt. They had no idea I'd taught myself calculus, linear algebra, differential equations, and was now working through real analysis. They had no idea that while they slept, I was reading graduate-level research papers on topics they couldn't pronounce, let alone understand. I had learnt something vital. Power reveals itself only when necessary. Until then, it watches, it waits, it grows in darkness like a seed underground, invisible but relentlessly expanding. My father once told Victoria, within my hearing, "Amelia's not ambitious like you. Some people are just meant to be ordinary. There's no shame in that." Victoria had nodded sympathetically. "At least she seems happy at Westbrook. She never complains." I had smiled from the doorway. Let them think what they wanted. Their perception of me had nothing to do with reality, and reality was the only thing that mattered. The turning point came in my junior year, though I didn't recognise it as such at the time. Westbrook High was selected, somewhat randomly, I suspect, to participate in a district-wide academic competition. Every high school would send their top students to compete in mathematics, science, and literature. Winners would receive scholarships, recognition, and press coverage. Riverside Prep, naturally, was expected to dominate. They had resources, private tutors, coaches specifically hired to prepare students for these competitions. Victoria was representing them in literature, a category she had won the previous year, with an essay about feminist themes in Virginia Woolf. Westbrook's administration barely cared about the competition. They announced it during morning announcements in the same bored tone they used for everything. "Academic competition in 3 weeks. Sign up in the main office if interested. That is all." Nobody signed up. Why would they? Westbrook students didn't win academic competitions. We were the school other schools felt sorry for. The school that made everyone else look good by comparison. After 3 days with 0 sign-ups, they made another announcement. "We need at least 1 student per category for the academic competition. If nobody volunteers, we'll have to select students randomly." I volunteered for mathematics during lunch period. The guidance counsellor, a woman named Mrs. Hendricks who looked perpetually overwhelmed, stared at me in surprise. "Amelia Richardson, you want to compete in mathematics?" "Yes." She pulled up my transcript on her computer, scrolling through it. "You have straight A's. That's good. But this competition is very advanced. These are university-level problems. Riverside Prep has been preparing their students all year." "I understand." "I'm not trying to discourage you," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I just want you to have realistic expectations. Westbrook has never even placed in the top 10 in this competition. We usually come in last." "I'd still like to try." She sighed and handed me a registration form. "All right, fill this out. The competition is 3 weeks from Saturday. You'll need transportation to the district office building. We don't have funds for a bus, so you'll have to arrange that yourself." "That's fine. Thank you." As I left her office, I heard her mutter to her colleague, "Poor kid. This is going to be humiliating for her." I didn't tell my parents about the competition. There was no point. They wouldn't come to watch, and I didn't want them there anyway. Instead, I spent those 3 weeks reviewing everything I had taught myself over the past 4 years. I worked through advanced problem sets. I practiced proofs. I tested myself against competition mathematics from previous years, which I found in the university library's archives. The problems were challenging, but not impossible. They required creative thinking. Yes, but they also required fundamental understanding of mathematical principles I had internalized through hundreds of hours of independent study. I felt ready. Not confident exactly, because confidence implied concern about outcome. I felt prepared, and preparation was all I could control. The day of the competition, I took the public bus to the District Administrative Centre, a modern building with glass walls and expensive furniture, the kind of place that made Westbrook's crumbling infrastructure look even worse by comparison. Riverside Prep arrived in matching blazers with their school logo. They had a faculty advisor who handed out last-minute study materials and pep talks. They looked polished, prepared, confident. I wore jeans and a sweater from a thrift store. I carried nothing but a pencil, my student ID, and a graphing calculator I had bought used from a yard sale 2 years earlier. Victoria saw me as her group filed into the building. Her eyes widened with genuine shock. "Amelia, what are you doing here?" "Competing," I said simply. She laughed. Not meanly exactly, but with the kind of automatic dismissal that comes from years of assuming superiority. "In what category?" "Mathematics." Her expression shifted to something like pity. "Oh, honey, these are really hard problems. I mean, really hard. Graduate level stuff. Maybe you should just watch this year. You could learn something for next time." "Maybe," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She touched my arm in what she probably thought was a supportive gesture. "It's just that I'd hate for you to be embarrassed. Everyone from all the schools will be there, including our parents' friends. You know how people talk." "I'll take my chances." She shrugged. "Okay, good luck, I guess." The mathematics portion was 3 hours long. 50 problems, ranging from basic algebra to multivariable calculus, each progressively harder. The final 10 problems would challenge graduate students. Most competitors would be lucky to complete 30 problems with any degree of accuracy. We sat in a large testing room, spaced apart at individual desks. A proctor explained the rules. No talking, no phones, no leaving until time expired or until finished. Show all work. Partial, credit available. "You may begin." I opened the test booklet and read through all 50 problems first. Not carefully, just scanning to understand the scope and structure. Algebra problems, geometry proofs, calculus applications, differential equations, number theory, abstract algebra. Then I returned to problem 1 and began working. The early problems took seconds each, basic manipulations, standard formulas, the kind of mathematics that had become automatic for me years ago. The middle problems required more thought, setting up coordinate systems, applying theorems correctly, checking work to avoid careless errors. The final problems demanded creativity. These were the competition-level questions designed to separate excellent students from extraordinary ones. They required seeing patterns, making connections between seemingly unrelated concepts, constructing proofs from first principles. I had seen problems like these before in my independent studies. I had worked through similar challenges in graduate-level textbooks. I knew not just the techniques, but the underlying philosophy of how to approach mathematical problems without obvious solutions. I finished all 50 problems in 93 minutes. Then, I went back through and checked every solution twice, looking for errors, verifying calculations, ensuring my proofs were airtight. The proctor kept glancing at me, clearly assuming I had given up and was just sitting there. When I raised my hand to indicate I was finished, she looked at the clock, then at me, then at my answer sheet with undisguised skepticism. "You're finished with all 50 problems?" "Yes, ma'am." She collected my materials, flipping through the pages. Every problem had work shown. Every answer was filled in. Her expression suggested she thought I had simply filled in random answers to escape early. "You can wait in the hallway until the time expires," she said. I sat on a bench outside the testing room and waited. Through the glass door, I could see other students still working frantically, some with their heads in their hands, some staring at problems with visible frustration. When the time expired, I watched them file out, looking exhausted and defeated. The Riverside Prep students were comparing answers. trying to determine how many they'd gotten right, arguing about methodologies. "I couldn't even attempt the last 10, one said. "Same. Those differential equations were brutal." "I think I got maybe 35 done. Probably only 30 right, though." Nobody spoke to me. Nobody asked how I had done. I was the girl from Westbrook, the school that always lost, the competitor nobody worried about. Perfect. Results would be announced in 2 weeks at a formal ceremony. I returned to my routine immediately. School, library, home, invisible. My parents didn't know I had competed. Victoria didn't mention seeing me there. Probably she assumed I had embarrassed myself and didn't want to humiliate me further by bringing it up. I didn't think about the competition constantly. It was done. Whatever happened would happen. I had done my best work, and that was all I could control. What I didn't expect was the phone call. I was at the university library on a Saturday afternoon, working through a quantum mechanics textbook and taking notes on wave functions, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. "Is this Amelia Richardson?" "Yes." "This is Dr. Patricia Holloway, head of the mathematics department at State University. I'm one of the judges for the district academic competition. Could you come to my office on Monday afternoon? I'd like to discuss your test." My heart should have raced. It should have hammered against my ribs. But years of trained emotional control kept me perfectly calm. "Is something wrong?" A long pause. "No, nothing's wrong. I'd like to meet you. Would 4 o'clock work?" "Yes, ma'am, thank you." Dr. Holloway's office was on the 3rd floor of the mathematics building. I had passed dozens of times on my way to the library. I had never been inside. Faculty spaces were different from public areas. You needed key cards, permission, a reason to be there. Now I had a reason. The office was cluttered with papers, books, and mathematical models. Whiteboards covered 2 walls, filled with equations and diagrams. Dr. Holloway was in her 50s, with grey hair, pulled back in a practical bun, and sharp eyes that studied me carefully as I entered. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "You're a junior at Westbrook High?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you completed the mathematics competition 2 weeks ago?" "Yes." She pushed my answer sheet across the desk. It was covered in red marks, but not corrections, check marks, exclamation points, annotations like "excellent approach" and "clever" and "graduate level technique." "You scored perfectly," she said without preamble. 50 out of 50, the first perfect score in the 15-year history of this competition. I nodded slowly, absorbing this information. "More than that," she continued, leaning forward, "several of your solutions use methodologies I don't expect from high school students. Problem 43, the differential equations question. You used a technique from dynamical systems theory that's typically taught in graduate-level courses. Where did you learn that?" "I've been studying," I said simply. "Studying what?" I pulled up Westbrook's course catalogue. The highest mathematics class they offer is pre-calculus, and that class hasn't had a qualified teacher in 3 years. So where exactly have you been studying graduate-level mathematics? "At the library. Here. At the university." Dr. Holloway sat back in her chair, studying me with an intensity I found neither uncomfortable nor threatening. She was trying to understand, to fit pieces together. "How long have you been teaching yourself university-level mathematics?" "Since I was 12. "You're 17 now?" 16. Her eyebrows rose. 16, a junior. Teaching yourself graduate-level material for 4 years. Do your parents know about this?" "No." "Why not?" I met her eye steadily. "They wouldn't care." The silence that followed was heavy. Dr. Holloway wasn't judging me. She was processing, calculating. understanding. "Amelia," she said finally, "I'd like you to take some placement exams, real ones administered by the university. Mathematics, physics, chemistry, whatever subjects you've been studying independently. I want to see exactly where you stand." "Why?" "Because if you're as far ahead as I think you are, I can help you. There are programs, early admission, advanced standing, scholarship opportunities, but I need to know what we're working with first." I took 7 placement exams over the next 2 weeks. I did them quietly, after school, in empty university classrooms where Dr. Holloway had arranged testing sessions with department administrators who looked skeptical at first and shocked afterward. Mathematics, graduate level. I tested equivalent to a student completing their master's degree. Physics, upper undergraduate. I could have entered the major as a senior. Chemistry, upper undergraduate, same level as physics. Computer science, intermediate undergraduate. I had less experience here, but still tested well. Literature, advanced undergraduate. Years of reading everything in Westbrook's library had consequences. Dr. Holloway assembled the results and stared at them for a long time when we met in her office again. She didn't speak for almost 5 minutes, just stared. "This is extraordinary," she said finally. "Amelia, you could enroll here as a graduate student right now. Today, skip your senior year of high school entirely and begin a master's program in mathematics." "My parents won't allow it." "You're 16, but you're also demonstrating exceptional circumstances. There are legal pathways for academic emancipation. I have colleagues who specialize in exactly these kinds of situations. We could..." "No," I said quietly but firmly. "Not yet." She looked at me questioningly. "I want to finish high school first," I continued, choosing my words carefully. "I want to graduate from Westbrook, walk across that stage, then I'll come here." "Why wait? Why stay somewhere that's holding you back?" I smiled, not the empty smile I had perfected for my parents. A smile with purpose, with intention. Because I want them to watch me graduate from the school they sent me to as punishment. I want them to see me walk across that stage in front of everyone, and then I want them to see what I do next. Dr. Holloway studied me for a long moment, then she nodded slowly. "All right, I understand. But starting this summer, you're enrolling here officially. Part-time student status while you finish high school will get you into real classes with real faculty. And when you graduate from Westbrook next year, you'll already have graduate credits completed. Does that work?" "Yes, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Graduate school is difficult even for students who've had traditional preparation. You're going to be working harder than you've ever worked." I smiled again. Good. The academic competition awards ceremony was held 3 weeks later at Riverside Prep's auditorium. Naturally, they hosted, since they won most categories most years. My parents attended because Victoria was receiving recognition for placing 3rd in literature. They had no idea I was also receiving an award. I hadn't told them I'd competed, and Victoria apparently hadn't mentioned seeing me there. I sat in the audience, anonymous in a crowd of students and parents and faculty from across the district. Victoria was on stage with the other literature winners, looking radiant in her Riverside Prep blazer, smiling for photos. My parents sat 5 rows ahead of me. My father had his arm around my mother's shoulders. They looked proud, happy, complete. When they announced the mathematics category, my mother leaned toward my father. "This is always so boring, just numbers and equations." The presenter, a district superintendent with silver hair and an expensive suit, smiled. "This year we have something unprecedented in this category. For the first time in the competition's 15-year history, a student achieved a perfect score. 50 out of 50 correct answers, many using advanced methodologies that exceeded our expectations. My father perked up slightly. Perfect score? Which school? This student, the presenter continued, will receive a full scholarship to State University and has already been invited to join their graduate program in mathematics. An extraordinary achievement from an extraordinary young person. My mother whispered, Must be from Riverside. Please welcome, from Westbrook High School, Amelia Richardson. The auditorium went silent. Not the respectful silence of applause waiting to happen. The shocked silence of collective disbelief. I stood from my seat in the middle of the audience and walked down the aisle toward the stage. Every eye turned to me. Students from Riverside Prep stared with confusion. Teachers looked baffled. The presenter was smiling, but several faculty members on stage looked like they thought there had been a mistake. And my parents. I passed directly by their row. My mother's face was white, bloodless. My father's mouth was slightly open, frozen mid-breath. Victoria, visible on stage, was staring at me like I was a stranger she had never seen before. I walked up the stage steps with steady legs, my expression calm, controlled, revealing nothing of what I felt inside. The presenter shook my hand firmly. Remarkable work, Amelia. Dr. Holloway tells me you've been studying independently. Yes, sir. Incredible. Truly incredible. Where will you be attending university? State University. I'll be starting graduate level coursework this summer. Applause finally started, scattered at first, then building. But it was the confused applause of people who didn't quite understand what was happening, who were trying to reconcile the failing school with the perfect score, the invisible girl with the unprecedented achievement. I accepted the medal and certificate with steady hands. The medal was heavy, gold-plated, engraved with my name, and first place, mathematics. The certificate was formal, signed by the superintendent and all the judges, including Dr. Holloway. As I walked back to my seat, I finally allowed myself to glance at my parents again. My father was staring straight ahead now, jaw clenched. My mother's hands were clasped in her lap so tightly, her knuckles were white. Victoria was still on stage, but she wasn't smiling anymore. I sat down in my seat, placed the medal in my lap, and waited for the ceremony to end. They didn't speak to me on the drive home. My mother drove. My father sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window. Victoria kept turning around from the back seat to stare at me, but said nothing. The silence was heavy, oppressive, not the comfortable silence of people at ease with each other. The brittle silence of people who have no idea what to say. When we arrived home, I went straight to my room. I didn't wait for the interrogation. I didn't need to. It would come. Sure enough, an hour later, they knocked on my door. Not one parent. Both of them. Victoria hovering behind them in the hallway. Explain, my father said without preamble. I placed first in the mathematics competition. We saw that. How? Westbrook doesn't teach advanced mathematics. I taught myself. My mother's voice was strained, uncertain. What does that mean, taught yourself? I've been studying independently since I was 12. University-level mathematics, physics, chemistry. I've been taking the bus to State University's library every weekend for 4 years. They looked at each other, then back at me, as though I was speaking a foreign language. The presenter mentioned a graduate program, my father said slowly. Yes, I've taken placement exams. I've been accepted as a graduate student in the mathematics department. I'll be starting part-time this summer while I finish high school. Silence. Victoria appeared fully in the doorway. That's impossible. Graduate programs are for people with master's degrees. You're a junior in high school. I looked at her calmly. I tested at graduate level. Dr. Holloway confirmed it. I'll be the youngest student in the program, but I'm qualified. My mother sat down on my bed without asking, looking dazed. When did this happen? How did we not know? You didn't ask. The words hung in the air, simple, factual, devastating. My father's face darkened. Don't be dramatic. We've always supported your education. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. We both knew the truth. They tried to control it after that, to contain it, to somehow reshape this development into something that fit their narrative. My father wanted me to wait, to transfer to Riverside Prep for senior year, to apply to universities properly through normal channels. My mother worried about what people would think. Victoria stopped speaking to me entirely, retreating to her university with wounded pride. But I had already set things in motion. Dr. Holloway helped me file for early emancipation. My academic standing qualified as extraordinary circumstances. By the end of summer, I was legally independent and moving into university housing. My parents stood in the driveway the day I left, watching me load my single suitcase into Dr. Holloway's car. My father's last words to me were, "You'll fail. You'll realise you're in over your head and come back." I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had spent 8 years ensuring I knew I was less than, who had deliberately limited my future to elevate his stepdaughter. "Maybe," I said, "but I'd rather fail reaching for something real than succeed at being invisible." I didn't fail. I completed my master's in 15 months, published my thesis, entered the doctoral program at 19, defended my dissertation at 22, the youngest PhD in mathematics from State University in 60 years. Stanford hired me at 23. My parents didn't attend my dissertation defense. Victoria sent a text that said, "Congrats, I guess." I felt nothing. They had stopped mattering years ago. Now I stand in lecture halls and teach brilliant minds. I publish research that advances my field. I mentor students who remind me of my younger self, underestimated, hungry, relentless. People sometimes ask if I'm angry about my childhood, about the deliberate neglect, about being sent to a failing school as punishment. I'm not angry. Anger would require caring, and I simply don't. My parents tried to dim my light. Instead, they taught me to generate my own. They tried to make me invisible. Instead, they taught me to observe from the shadows, while building something they couldn't imagine. They enrolled me in a failing school to humiliate me. I walked out as the youngest professor in Stanford's history, not because I wanted revenge, not because I needed to prove them wrong, but because while they were busy trying to erase me, I was busy becoming unforgettable. I didn't destroy them, I outgrew them. My victory was never revenge, it was becoming untouchable.